outside of Milo. And I'm really standing here today because of the values that my parents taught me. They said to make sure we take care of our friends and our family, but help others, help strangers alike, because when everybody does well, then our community thrives. And they also taught my sisters and me to be strong and stand up for what's right, and to fight back against injustice, even when it means standing up to someone more powerful. And it's really how I've tried to live my life. It's why I spent my career at the state of Iowa, helping to bring in good paying jobs. That half the kids in one of our biggest school districts in the state literally lost a lottery and got the 2.5-hour version of school instead of the full day version. So I got busy. And it took about 8 months working through the administration to help the kids in the next grade. I couldn't do anything to help my son, but I could sure help the kids coming after him. And started working through the administration to make this happen, and realized we had one meeting left where we had to get this approved for the kids in the next grade. And I've got pretty sharp elbows when it comes to doing what's right, so I put together the data on the subject matter inequity and presented it to the board and said, you know, you've got to get this changed for the kids next year, or I'm taking this information to the head of the Department of Education and the Des Moines Register, and letting them know you're just not living up to this district's expectations and you're failing its kids and its families. Well, they passed it. That superintendent's on my endorsement list because he knows when it comes to doing what's right, I'm not going to stop until we get the job done. And that's why I'm running for Congress, because right now there's nobody in Washington that's looking out for our corner of Iowa. And I think every single day we can see that corporations and millionaires and special interests, they've got a seat at the table. They're definitely reaping the rewards, but Iowans don't have a voice and we're being left behind. So I want to get out there to represent all of you and your friends and your family and our teachers who are under attack right now, our parents who hope that they won't go bankrupt under any one of these new healthcare laws, our seniors hoping they're going to have the Social Security and the Medicare they need, and our students who are coming out with so much debt they can't get off on the right foot. These are the people who really need a seat in Washington, and when I get there, they're going to have that. I mentioned earlier I'm a mom. I've got not just one teenage boy, but two. So any advice from the three of you would be really helpful. And I'm also a small business owner. My husband and I own a small digital design firm, a lot of website work, things like that. So I understand the struggles that Iowans are facing and Iowa families are facing. And when I go to Congress, I'll do whatever it takes to raise up the lives of the people that live here. And I think that starts by rebuilding the middle class and definitely investing in our future. So I want to bring good paying jobs back here to Iowa, jobs that a family can be supported on, and make sure that we've got the structures in place so that working women and families can be successful, like better paid family leave and affordable child care, and closing the pay gap. Right here in Iowa, we would put almost $5 billion back into our economy annually by closing that pay gap, and put $10,500 plus into the pockets of every single working woman. And imagine how that would help their families and help our economy. So we've got a lot of opportunity there. And I want to get out and address this healthcare issue because right now they're treating it like it's a political football, and people's lives are literally at stake. And Congressman Young and the Republicans want to take us back. They want to take us back to a time where pre-existing conditions weren't covered, where our seniors couldn't afford the services and the medicines they need, and where some basic care wasn't even available. And I mentioned earlier, my husband and I are small business owners, and I understand this. As a matter of fact, when we started our small business, you couldn't get maternity coverage as part of an individual plan back then unless you paid for a rider that cost $1,000 a month and then held that in place for at least a year before becoming pregnant. Well, of course, I didn't know what date I was going to become pregnant, and we couldn't afford this. So when we had our second son, who's now 13, we had to sell our personal items on eBay just to cover the cost of those medical bills because I had a baby in a hospital. And we can't go back to a time where families are forced to determine if they're going to put food on the table and keep the lights on or make sure that their family has the health care that they need. So we got to fix that. And then I want to invest in our future, as I mentioned earlier, and I can't think of a better place to start than with our kids. So I want to make sure that our public school system is strong, that we've got the resources available. Right now, what's happening out in Washington under Secretary DeVos's leadership is unconscionable. You know, they're taking money from our already underfunded school system. We only get about 8% of our funding for schools from federal government, and she's diverting that into a voucher program, which will really hurt our public schools. So I want to get out there and defend that. make sure that we bring opportunities back to our kids in high school with trades programs and internships so that any kid, no matter what they want to pursue, has opportunity, and definitely cap the student loan interest rate at no more than 2% because nobody should be capitalizing on our kids' futures. And then I also want to invest in our future by addressing climate change. We all know it's real, and it's something that we've done really well here in Iowa as far as renewable energy. And I know I had the opportunity to direct the governor's agenda for clean energy and the environment and help bring the wind industry here to Iowa and move us towards energy independence, but by the way, put about 9,000 people back to work in that process. So we've got incredible opportunity there. I want to double down on that. Bring in solar on a large scale. We're ranked around 16th in the nation as far as solar opportunity. And then of course bringing in the support mechanisms, the battery storage and smart grid technology so we can actually access and sell that and build our economy around it. So there's a lot to do. But I'll tell you what, when I get to Congress, I'll work with anybody. And I mean that. I'll work with Republicans or Democrats as long as it's right for the people here in our corner of the state. But I'm going to fight back against any of them if it's not. Every single day, we are seeing so many issues pile up that we need to fix. And I think it's time that we send somebody to Congress who actually has that experience in solving complex government problems and the leadership skills to do it as well. And I think it's time we send a fighter, somebody who's going to stand up for what's right and not back down until we get the job done. So I'm here to ask for your voice and your vote. Because together we can bring hope and opportunity to every single person in this district and in this state and in this country once again. And I'm so grateful to be here and would love to answer any questions you have.
I'm glad to hear you say something about Betsy DeVos because we're retired educators. I don't think she has any knowledge at all about the public school systems or special ed. In fact, she'd like to cut all special ed people out of school systems.
That's right. Yep,
From what
absolutely.
I've heard her comment. I don't know if she's ever stepped foot inside a public school.
Seems like she hasn't. Absolutely. Yeah. What, do you have any questions, Abby?
In terms of like healthcare, what do you think is like the best solution to the healthcare?
So, the solution I'm proposing is twofold. I want to make sure that we shore up the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was a really great start and a monumental law to move us towards affordable, effective care for everybody. But it has a lot we need to fix with it. It's still expensive. There's not enough providers. So I want to get in there and make sure that we reduce the costs, that we are able to negotiate prescription drugs. That's one of the big issues with it. We can't negotiate those. That's very costly. And make sure that we continue to support making sure that every single kid can stay on a plan until they're 26, making sure that anybody with a pre-existing condition gets coverage and that we don't have lifetime caps. So I want to get in there and shore that up and protect it. At the same time, I want to introduce a public option so anybody can buy into Medicare or Medicaid. And I think that this combined approach is our best way to get to an opportunity for everybody to have affordable, effective care. And that's what I'm really pushing for. We've got a lot of issues within the system that we need to fix that quite honestly can't even be solved by a Medicare for all option. The costs are incredibly high still. Medicare works well. It has limited overhead and they perform really well. But within the system itself, we still have a lot of waste and a lot of cost that we need to address. And what we're seeing as well, Medicare used to be supported on a 7-to-1 ratio, so 7 workers paying into support 1 person. We're now down to a 3-to-1 ratio on that. And as we continue to have less kids, people continue to have less kids, we're going to see that ratio go down even further. And that's why that approach isn't sustainable. We can move towards that, but we need to find another approach that addresses all of those issues in that process. And that's what I hope to do.
In response to the climate change, how specifically does this impact Iowa, and what can you do, or what do you want to do when you get to Congress to improve whatever we need here? Can you respond to that?
Absolutely. So the biggest impact that climate change has on Iowans is basically what's happening from a weather perspective, and the increased droughts and increased flooding. And that's dramatically impacting the yields that our farmers are able to reap. And so that's a big issue, and our farmers understand that as well. There might be some disagreement about the cause of climate change, but they do understand. They agree that they're seeing changes, massive changes in weather patterns that are affecting their yields. And so there's several things that I would like to do. Talked earlier about increased wind and increased solar, but I also want to approach what I call new technology agriculture. So take for instance tilling practices. When we till the soil, we release carbon. As that carbon is released, it contributes to climate change. And so we actually have the research to understand how to create machinery that can help us with that tilling, so that will help us till the least. So dependent on the soil and dependent on the seed, we can determine how far we need to till down so that we release less carbon as a result of that. And then at the same time, we have the opportunity to create machinery that will capture any carbon that is released in that same process and then sink it back down into the ground where it can't be released. So I think we should be leading the country and leading the world in opportunities like that. And it's already, the research is there, and there's being a little bit of money put behind it, but not enough. And so that's one thing that I really, really want to promote. Obviously, helping our farmers with solar opportunity to help them with that economic growth as well. I would like to see us look at cleaner fuels. When I worked on the Energy and Environment Plan, we helped with the ethanol industry and with clean biofuels, but we need to move more towards things like algae-based biofuels and growing those types of switchgrass as opposed to ethanol, because really, quite honestly, continuing to trade out corn and soybeans is hurting our soil, it's hurting our water, and we need to start readjusting our crops to some degree as well. Back in the day, we used to 13, 15 crops. From strawberry to oats to hemp, which they just are hoping to legalize industrial hemp here, and oats and hay and all of that. And so I want to see us also move towards crop production that will help our soil, help our water. That's not as much from a climate change perspective, but from an environmental perspective.
Well, I got a question for you, Cindy.
What's that, Uncle Pat? My uncle.
I'm busted, everyone knows that.
I just told her.
So what do you feel about the last time I saw you speak? Since then, President Trump has threatened all kind of tariffs. And Senator Grassley says the Democrats are not joining in the fight to talk these tariffs down. How do you feel about that?
Wow, I disagree with what Senator Grassley is saying, because I've seen statements from Congresspeople, Democrats, that are saying these tariffs are wrong and how they're hurting those individual, the states that they represent. Certainly I disagree with these tariffs. We're already starting to see the impact on the first round of tariffs from our pork production, as well as a lot of our manufacturing. I've talked to solar manufacturers who rely on steel as part of their products, and they're having to raise their prices, and they're having a really difficult time right now to cover those costs, and then they're losing business as a result of it. So if we continue down through this trade war now, which of course President Trump wants the tariff on soybeans, corn, pork, beef, all kinds of other things, our economy here is really going to shrivel up. And so that's a huge problem. I want to make sure that we get out there and stop that. Hopefully we'll put an end to this potential trade war now, because we all know that trade wars don't get us any good results. They're just going to end up hurting us. So I'm against it, and I've actually seen several Congresspeople, as I've been kind of watching this process, who have come out and talked against it. So, but that's what they're saying, that the Democrats aren't pushing against it. Interesting. Okay.
But Senator Grassley today will challenge Trump that if he fires any of these guys, he's committing political suicide. Maybe you haven't seen that. Grassley came out this afternoon with a speech.
Oh, that if he
on
the investigation?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That if he fires him, we all remember Saturday Night Massacre, or I do at least.
Yeah. Well, there's Well, we'll see what happens. It's taking a whole new turn here now within going into his private lawyer's office, so we'll see. Yeah.
I don't want to take up all your time, but back to education, and I do some in education, but I'm just wondering what specifically, what are maybe your 3 top things that you'd like to do with it, in terms of vouchers? I don't know, just curious what you.
Well, I would like to first of all see every single kid in this country get a post-secondary education, and that can be an apprenticeship program.
Yes.
It could be a 2-year college, it could be a 4-year college, whatever works for them. But I think that's incredibly important. I spent a decade in state government, and up until actually even consulting, up until about I started to run for office, I worked with Iowa College Student Aid Commission, and really tried to help them work on reducing the costs within our in particular within our Regents institutions, but to also make sure that we had more resources going towards our students. One of the last things I worked on with them was helping to get some more of our kids from our Latino communities into post-secondary opportunity, because that's a growing population here, and certainly one we know needs to be skilled to meet our job needs. And so in that case, we worked on helping those populations apply for the FAFSA. Because we know that when they do, they're probably going to apply for college, and when they get accepted and have a much better life. And so you're looking at a population that distrusts government quite a bit, and their parents have an expectation that their kids just go to work and help the family right after high school. So we set up kind of really community engagement partnerships with those different communities, and had specific events to bring in families to educate them on the value of going to college, or a 2-year college, or an apprenticeship or something, so that we could get more of those kids to apply so that they would go to college. And so I want to see us look at opportunities to engage all of our different communities in making sure their kids have a post-secondary education, so that's a key for me. I mentioned earlier I want to bring those trades programs and internships back into our high schools, and I think we need that more than ever right now. We already have a skill gap here in Iowa where we don't have enough well-trained tradespeople, and those jobs pay well.
Yes.
And they get into a structure as an apprentice, whereas they continue to grow by about their 5th year. For instance, as an electrical worker, they're making $70,000, and they don't have any student loan debt. So these are good paying jobs, and they provide people with a lifetime of work. So I want to see us bring that back. And then of course with our K through 12 schools, we need to increase the resources because our teachers are dealing with so much, schools and the administrations as well. I grew up on the south side and went to Lovejoy Elementary School, and that was a very middle-class school then. Now it's a 99.9% free and reduced lunch program school, where they've got washers and dryers on site to where they get clothes from donated, where they send kids home with clean clothes, where they of course have to send them home with food over the weekends, and that they have programs where kids come in all summer long for food, and of course they're dealing with mental health issues. They're dealing with so many issues that teachers in the past didn't have to as much or had better resources for, and their class sizes are ballooning. And so our teachers can't take it. I mean, they're not able to do the job that they need to do because they're having to deal with all of these things. And they do so because they've got a good heart for it and they want their kids to succeed. But their schools are doing things like driving parents to work in low-income communities because if their parent misses a day of work, they miss a day of pay, or they might not be able to keep that job. And that's going to impact that child. And so they're doing so many things to help those communities and help those kids. And we need to make sure that they've got the appropriate resources so that the teachers can focus on teaching and making sure that they've got that opportunity to help kids in that way. So we need to make sure the resources are there, quite honestly. And I moved back to Iowa because when we had our 2 boys, because I had a great education here growing up. And I wanted our kids to grow up with this education. And unfortunately, when I was in school here till now, we've plummeted as far as where we rank in the country. And we need to turn that back around.
One more question. I have a question You talked a little bit about like in post-secondary education internships and opportunities for students. So how are you gonna make sure that those students have like equal opportunity to all those sorts of things? So for like Latin American students, they don't always have the money or the resources available to them to get to these internships, or they don't have the resources to actually be at these internships when it's unpaid. So how are you gonna make sure that these opportunities are?
So that's a great point. Appreciate you bringing that up. A few ways. First of all, there's already some really neat programs going on that aren't very resource intensive. One of my supporters is Dr. Yogi Shah. He's the director of palliative care at Broadlands Hospital. And they have a program there that they work with a couple of local high schools that are more on the poorer side of town, North High and East, and they have a program in their school, an internship program for juniors and seniors, where they basically learn a little bit about healthcare, have a spend time at the hospital as part of the internship, and if they have to get a certain GPA, and then when they do, they get a job as a CNA at the hospital. So they get an opportunity to actually have a good paid job in a field that's really growing. And those are the types of things that we can replicate across this district, across the state, across the country. They really just take people with the right set of values and ability to coordinate and something like that. So those are the types of things that are very, that don't require a heck of a lot of financial backing or resources or cost to any other kid. But the programs that we would have to create would be, outside of things like that, would be federally funded. If we're going to bring trades programs back into our high schools, we're going to need more federal funding for that, as well as developing internship programs with local businesses. We're going to need some funding for that as well. But I'd expect that there's a partnership with our businesses in that. And they should be coming to the table because they'll benefit the most from that, is having these skilled workers here in Iowa. And if you've been reading any of the Register recently, there's been a few articles about the fact that we're lacking skilled workers here in Iowa. And our manufacturers and a lot of service provider businesses, they're ready to jump in and help support programs that will help them get those skilled workers. So I would like to develop a government-private partnership to help us do that as well. Okay.
We give Cindy a round of applause.
Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Simpson Dems. Let's get these kids out to vote, guys. We need you. I was saying earlier, only 14% of our college-age kids in this country vote. And I asked a woman who's trying to change this about some data on the 3rd district, and she said we've got 41,400 kids in this district, and we're only getting 14% of that vote. So we've got a lot of opportunity there. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing, and would love to help you with some get out the vote as we get closer to the primary as well. So, yeah. Thanks for everything. Appreciate it.
Excellent.